I'm Joe Jagos. I'm the exhibition coordinator here at the church. I've been with the church for 2 years. Prior to this, and still ongoing, I've worked in the art world for about 20 years, mostly around New York, a little bit in San Francisco, a little bit in Detroit, but I've been in New York for 17 years. So, so I've been working with the church for 2 of those. Prior to this, I was at MoMA, New Museum, and some other institutions. Those various ones. So now I'm here. I work remotely. I'm based in Brooklyn, but I come out here for specific things, like this. Also to do meetings with different artists and curators, kind of liaison between all those people, right? So for me, my process, which I'll talk about, we design an exhibition remotely, have like 10% in person and 90% online, because that's the way people are working nowadays, right? So I'll elaborate on that more, all the devices used for that. But yeah, I'm also a professor at Parsons. I've been there for about 6 years. I've been affiliated with the school for about 10, so I teach fashion illustration and experiential marketing for fashion. So why that came in good with this, I'll talk about too, because Simon Dunan is, if you don't know him, he is the creative director of Barney's for many years. So him and I were actually able to kind of like have a really good conversation about how to accomplish this. But yeah, so that's me. I'll let Liam introduce himself.
Yeah, I'm Liam. I am a research assistant here at the church, and I do various things at the church. I started at the Pushpin exhibition. I did the designs for the wall labels, which are based on designs that, I was kind of following the tradition. And then I was, Joe and Sherry brought me on to do the typewriter exhibit, and I did the research for all these typewriters and wrote all of the wall labels and the labels next to all the typewriters here. And me and Joe are working on a catalog for the next exhibition that's happening in the summer. In June, I graduated from Benedictine College. I studied visual arts, creative writing, a little bit of political science, kind of a bunch of different stuff. And I finished mostly in creative writing, was like my main focus. And my thesis was in 2 parts. I did tabletop game design and a thesis about comic books. And so I've kind of always been interested in materiality, kind of tactile things you can roll with you roll dice and play games, and comic books, that kind of physical turning of the page. And typewriters are kind of adjacent in this kind of materiality aspect of the things that I enjoy, and so I found a lot of connection to this, even though I didn't really know anything about typewriters before I started. I've done, I just started on this project, and I'll talk a little bit later about the research aspect and how I wrote all the labels and stuff, and we'll talk about some of our favorite typewriters.
Yeah, that's just to add on to what Liam's saying. That's an interesting point. I didn't know anything about typewriters really. I wrote maybe my 3rd grade paper on a typewriter, and then my dad went and got a word processor, computer word processor. So I got like the tail end of it, where I was still using whiteout, and I don't have to explain typewriters to everybody here, but I got to experience the tail end of it, because my mom was a self-professed typewriter extraordinaire. She could type 80 words per minute on a typewriter, which to me, with the weighted keys and everything, it's phenomenal. So she taught me how to use a typewriter. I got to learn a little bit, but I got to learn more through this process, and that's life, right? Like, you just start accumulating skills and knowledge, and we had learn together. So we'll talk more about how we developed the history in a little bit, but probably wondering how this even got started, right? Why are Tom Hanks typewriters? So I'm wondering that myself at first, like I already know Tom. Like, how did that come together? So Eric is knew Tom Hanks kind of as an acquaintance, but he had a friend that knew him more closely. So upon seeing the California Typewriters documentary, which was from 2007,
17, yeah.
17. There was that, and then Common Type. Has anybody read it or heard of it? Cool book. I wrote a good portion of it to get inspiration for this exhibition. So that book, he used many of the typewriters that are, I don't know about specifically in this exhibition, but a lot of the models, some of these work, some of them don't, but each story is typed with a different typewriter and kind of fits the era that it's from. Stuff like that. It's a great book. So yeah, that kind of sparked Eric's interest, but the part I found funnier or more funny is that who's going to design it? And Eric started wondering, well, who will design this exhibition? What is it going to look like? Like, how do you do a typewriter exhibition without it looking too antique or too just, like a bunch of machines sitting around? So he actually does Tai Chi on Shelter Island, and so does Simon Doonan. Simon Doonan, the king of camp. It's a book here, the Camp 100 that just came out. So if you don't know Simon, this book is a good introduction to his personality, which is the complete opposite of a typewriter. He's very colorful, very loud. He, with his designs, he grew up in London 60s, 70s, and was kind of a young punk doing store design. So somehow him and Eric ended up in Tai Chi class together the last few years, and Eric said, hey, you're a guy that does store, like exhibition and store design. Do you want to design something for Tom Hanks? And Simon, without a doubt, was like, sure, yeah. So that started the conversation, and that's how we got to this. So two very different things coming together in one place. So as far as show mechanics, well, we first had to get Tom's grace on what is the idea here? Like why, like let's get to know why typewriters, instead of making this a kind of a stringent feeling like here's Tom's typewriters, here's some information, put it together, like why typewriters, Tom? Even if we've seen the movies or like your documentaries, and also learning that he not snuck in, but in most of his movies since the 80s, he has typewriters in them. We tried to get that. Did you figure out a list?
I couldn't find it. What I did find is that, I wrote it down somewhere. None of the typewriters that are in his movies are in this exhibit, but I have some of the names of the ones that were in.
He has 300 of them. We have 35.
Oh my God.
Probably more in counting. So we.
The Olympia Report Deluxe Electric was in You've Got Mail.
Right.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, we did a Zoom call with Tom. Was it Sherry, Simon, and I all sat in, and Tom zoomed in with us, and we talked to him and just said, hey, tell us your vision, tell us why, and how. Like, how did you start collecting these? Because we want to think, how do we convey that to an audience? So Tom just said, can I talk for 3 minutes? And 45 minutes later, he told us how and why, and we'll talk about which, and I believe it's one of the three over there that influenced him to start collecting in the 80s. I'll get into that, but he told us a great story, all the impersonations. I can say that he definitely, in person, or like talking to him, is no different than he is in his movies, so it's just how he is, or at least was conveyed to me. So it was really interesting to get some insight from him. So we had to go to work and say, okay, we have notes, we have a conversation, what does this look like, Simon? And we started to get into the mechanics of that. So we had to think about things like color theme, the vintage posters you see around, and touching on color theme. If we can hand some of these out, there's some doubles in there, but this will start to give everybody an idea of the influences for the show. Simon's drawings, that I would get text, random text from Simon, because I'm working remotely from him, so a lot of this was from afar. And yeah, so I'll let you guys kind of grab some of these first before I go on.
Did Tom tell you why he started collecting typewriters?
I did, and I'll tell you over there.
Okay.
But it's kind of fun. He did impersonations of this whole interaction between him and the typewriter salesman he met in Turkey. So yeah, I wasn't expecting that. Okay. So what you're looking at here are, like I said, a combination of Simon's drawings, reiterations, redrawings, recoloring, resketching. The Wesselman one, I'll touch on that with my favorite typewriter over there, but it also does kind of coincide with the theme of the show. So, yeah, so let's see. The one, that's the color theme right there. So if we look at that one I'll touch on more. I know I should be holding it up, right? There's this, one of the vintage posters over there that Simon said, hey, I need to come up with a color theme for the show, because you can see the pedestals. Hey, help, thank you. There we go. So he said, I need a color theme for the show. I needed like a week or two to come up with this, and it's going to be based off one of these posters. So I said, hey Simon, there's this trick you can do online. You dump in a picture and it extracts the 5 main colors. Took me 30 seconds, and he just said, okay, like this is going to be good working together. So I helped him expedite a lot of processes based off simple drawings and just using remote technology, because he was going between Shelter Island and Florida. So let me say one thing that was interesting, if you look at these felt, all the felt underneath the typewriters, is I came up with the design for the boxes actually, because they had to be, as the request of Tom's office, protected from dust and a minor security protection. Plus you need felt to protect the tables, the surfaces. So you think you just go to the felt store and get this stuff, but there's actually only one company in the US that manufactures this felt board. And it's like a stiff, almost like a foam core covered felt. It's manufactured in Detroit. I'm from Detroit. I was going there for the holidays. This place is 15 minutes from me, and I had to get a guy that worked there to come in during the holidays, like just before the holidays. I'm not that bad. But I said, we got to get this felt, we need it cut. He CNC'd it for us. So just getting something, just as like a small insight to some of the minor details that go into the show. I had to go hunt this stuff down, and I had to do it on my holiday vacation. So it's not always as simple as you want it to be, but it was a happy accident, I like to call it. But yeah, so does anybody have any questions so far?
I do, yes. I've been looking at that sign. Feel free to try your hand at typing. Are you inviting the public to touch the?
With these two, these were loaned to us by the Hampton Star. So when we're done here talking or whatever, or if you just want to dip out of the tour, you can come here and type whatever you want on some empty pages.
But it's not an invitation to touch all the typewriters.
No, because that was my job to make sure you can't.
Yes, exactly. That's why I was confused. Yeah.
But yeah, I know it was hard installing these and not just kind of. There may have been a key pressed here or there, but big no-no in exhibition world. But yeah, these, go for it tonight if you want to try them out. So yeah, working with Simon, I feel like I've already kind of explained that. And laid these out. Yes?
How'd you transport them here?
That's actually on my list to talk about. So, transportation. Let's talk about that then. So, I've been in this industry, like I said, for about 20 years. Fortunately, I have a really good art courier I work with that's owned by a friend that I've known for about 14 years. So I trust him, and I don't trust just anybody getting stuff here, especially when it comes to machines like this. For some reason, I've shipped so much artwork around the world and been in charge of that, but these that we're more worried about because they're machines, they're not art, and they're finicky. All the mechanisms, some of them work, and we can't make them not work. So I'd never shipped typewriters, so I had to figure out how to do that. I started calling places in LA because they are located in Los Angeles at Tom's company called Playtone, which is a prop kind of ephemera company he has to rent out. So I worked with his assistant on this, Nicole Nelson, who was tremendously helpful in this process and patient. And I asked her, you know, how do you have someone you work with? For some reason she told me, well, no, not really. We just have a repair person. So I was like, okay, I gotta find someone in LA that is a shipping specialist, but understands the needs of typewriters. And this kind of doesn't exist. So I started just calling places. I called 3 of them, and one of them I called, and this guy, Aaron, answers the phone, and I said, hey, I got about 35 typewriters I need shipped. He's like, okay. I'm like, so some work, some don't, but I'll be honest, I've never shipped typewriters, and you're a typewriter repair person. Would you be able to guide me on that, and could we commission you to do this? And then he's like, yeah, sure, just give me some more info on it. And he had this tone in his voice. Because I don't want to say who it's for, because then, you know, I don't want to call a place and say, hey, Tom makes typewriters. And they'll overcharge or price or whatever, and then within a day I get a call back from him, and Aaron says, hey, look, you have Tom's typewriters, I know. Like, you're going to do a show with him. Is that who you're talking about? I said, yes. He's like, I'm his repair person. I would be happy to do that for you. And so we figured it out, and I was like never more relieved, because I can't be there to see any of it. So I had to trust someone, and he did an amazing job getting everything packed and putting that trust in him. So yeah, the shipping company I worked with, they communicated with them, got them wrapped up. Aaron got them here safely, and everything works, nothing broke. So we were very thrilled about that. So that's how the shipping works, plus a bunch of boring paperwork.
Many of them have cases.
A lot of them do, right? The only case we have on display is the one for the Olivetti and Valentine, which I'll explain why when we get over there. Also, they were just a lot of chunky. It was hard to show them all. But a lot of them do the cases, original cases.
And the cases travel with them?
Yeah, oh yeah. It was preferred they traveled in their cases, because a lot of the ones they're traveling typewriters, like those ones behind you are, well, that Corona specifically, which amazingly it folds into nothing almost, came in a beautiful case. So yeah, it was a process to get those here. But yeah, we were very fortunate for Aaron.
Did Tom Hanks pick the 35 to come out?
Great question. Yes, he did. He picked the 35, and I'm used to, as a registrar, which is my official title in parallel to exhibition design, I'm used to, most places have an archive. All they had were serial numbers. And I was like, oh, Tom has to know these inside and out. They have to have so much information on this. That's where this guy comes in. Because all I had were serial numbers and like kind of a site that had it looks like it's updated, but the layout of the site hasn't been updated since maybe 2001 or something. But the site has so much information on it, I was able to relay a lot of that, start a list, and then give it to Liam because they didn't have any photos really, like proper photos. So I shot all the photos of all the machines. If you saw any publicity for it, those were images that I had photographed. Liam and I worked together to create an archive for Tom of just these 35. So, and I'll let you talk about that.
Yeah, so in September, Jerry and Joe reached out to me. They said, we're doing this Pushpin exhibit, can you help with that? And then they were like, and in January, we're doing this typewriter exhibit, and we need help researching stuff. So I came on, and all I had were these serial numbers, some of which, I have to be honest with you, aren't totally accurate, which meant I had to go to other places. But also the database itself, like Joe was saying, is very it's very old, and there's not a lot of information. So what I ended up doing was cross-referencing the information with a bunch of personal blogs that all of these collectors were posting online, like on Substack and just on their websites that were also kind of old. And then I worked with the New York Public Library and Gramercy Typewriters, which is also works with Tom Hanks. Like he has also the Jay there, Jay Schweitzer, he's a senior technician. He's also done a bunch of work on Tom's typewriters. So I work with those two people to fact check a lot of the information and also get more new information about that. But yeah, most of the information that I got was just blogs online that I then went to New York Public Library or Jay, and they were like, that's correct, or he was like, that's wrong. I was like, okay, great. And then the next step to that was typing out, well, not typing, but typing on my computer, not my typewriter, and writing all of the wall labels. And that was a lot of fun to kind of use my creative writing degree for something that was a little bit, kind of put some of my own flair in it, and also tap into this language of wall labels, which I'm always thinking about whenever I go to a museum. How much do you want to give the audience? How much do you want the audience to take away? And typewriters are kind of the perfect work for that because they're very mechanical, they're very factual. So you tell facts. You don't say, oh, this evokes blah, 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 which I feel like a lot of wall labels will often accidentally get into, is telling the audience what they can just intuit themselves. And so a lot of the wall labels here are just facts about the typewriters themselves and how they were made and who made them and the designers. And we'll go into that a bit as we walk through the exhibit.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
As somebody that didn't, and I'm not bragging because I got to use one till 3rd grade, but how was it as a writer researching typewriters and feeling like, had you used one before, or did you ever have to use one?
I've never used a typewriter.
Yeah.
So, and I'm I barely even really know how to type. I'm like a bad typer. I don't do it in the way that people are supposed to do it. And I'm constantly copying and pasting and backspacing, and I make grammar mistakes, and so and you can't do any of that on a typewriter. And so, unless you have your white out, as far as I understand. And so, yeah, it was kind of, there was a little bit of like this surreal thing of like, I'm writing about these things on the thing that killed the industry for these things. But yeah.
I 100%. Yeah, it just to go back to the frustrations maybe I have from when I was 8 years old. But yeah, the new piece of paper, white out. Well, it doesn't look good. That's not the final copy. Remembering how to spell everything, dictionary. It's a lot longer process, and I feel like we're so spoiled. And now with AI, a whole other conversation, and my students using AI. I don't even know what they would do with a typewriter in front of them, other than purely for kind of aesthetic or fun, So it's generationally, it's nice to be here and be able to have a dialogue between different generations of to understand how these played a role in everybody's life. Simon, interestingly enough, which I will mention, his parents, did anybody come to Simon's talk? Yeah, interesting backstory there. His parents, they grew up, you know, not middle class, but kind of in poverty a little bit. And his parents, in order to become professionals, they learned to type. They're like, well, we will take typewriter classes, we will learn about typewriters, and it actually helped them. It was the first step in a big career. So just listening to his generational experience of how it actually changed his family's life, while we're here, you know, taking stabs at typewriters, it actually changed his family's life. And it's an amazing story that he told. Yeah, so cool. Liam, would you like to?
Yeah, sure.
Take us on a tour? Or?
Yeah, if you guys want to come back here, we can take a closer look at these guys. I'm just going to pick out a couple of my favorites. We're going to talk about a couple of his favorites. And if you have any questions about any of these, just feel free to ask. Yeah, I'm going to start with the Hermes 3000, which is, I like it a lot because of the design, but it's also often described as one of the most iconic typewriters, particularly because of the design, the sleekness of it, but also because a lot of writers of the 20th century, like Truman Capote and Sylvia Plath, used Hermes 3000s. Hermes, obviously, the Greek messenger god, so there's some kind of symbolism here about letters, typing, etc. I think that the kind of muted colors of the Hermes are also kind of iconic in that they're not. A lot of typewriters aren't expressing themselves with a particular color, the Hermes is kind of one of those that is being a little bit more in conversation maybe with aesthetic designs of the time that it was created. Anybody have any questions about?
So what years was this?
This one was 1970.
Oh. Is it electric or?
It is, no, it's not electric.
Oh. I have a question about this ad here where you saved $95. It seems like, how much were these typewriters?
They changed a lot throughout the years. Maybe Joe, could you speak to that more?
Yeah, the whole
I can't remember.
conversation
Yeah.
about this poster. We all kind of stumbled up on it one day reading. We said the same thing. Like, how much was a typewriter? It was $95. I think. What is that? What is it? 68, 65. So, can anybody?
Yeah, there's about $300 saved.
Right.
So how much would it have been?
Right. So this had to have been. I mean, how much was a computer in the 90s for a top of the line? I remember my dad paying $2,400 for something that's completely obsolete, you know, 10 years later. So an electric typewriter at this point, top of the line, like this is Mad Men era, like that one over there. So imagine going to the store and probably paying $700, $800, maybe $800 for that.
Wow.
Yeah, do the math, you know. So that is the best I can answer that question, but we all kind of had that moment. I don't know.
You know what, I had an Olivetti Valentine,
Oh yeah.
and it was a gift from my father, you know, years ago, and I actually sold it on eBay a couple of years ago, but I had the receipt for it, and I think it was about, would go back to the 60s. I think it was about $79 or something like that, that particular machine.
Yes, and that's the one I was actually going to talk about. But to add on to that, that was actually designed. Sorry if I'm telling you something you already know, but that was designed because they wanted to make it economical. They saw electronics and computers on their way, and that was designed as a vacation, as Satsa said, for the poet. I thought we almost had one of the, you know, he worked with Milton Glaser, and I wish we had the poster for the Valentine. But yeah, that was the concept. It was supposed to be an accessible, well, I'll talk about it more when we get over there. But yes, I love that typewriter, so I want to get one.
I didn't like the feel of it, because I was a secretary and I used the IBM Selectric and other typewriters in learning school, and the feel of it was not good.
Yeah, I think it was more of a marketing
Yeah.
thing. They just wanted to make a cool typewriter.
Right, it was cool, it was cool.
Sorry, Liam, I didn't want to.
No, yeah. Just one last thing to say about the Hermes is it's a Swiss typewriter, and it's from Switzerland, and the Alpine here is from Germany, and so there's this kind of an international collection to it. It's not just American companies. Yeah. And if there's anything else we want to look at here, we might as well move over to the IBM Selectric, which was just mentioned. I want to highlight this one for a couple of reasons. Number one, this was used in Mad Men, and it says as such, right there. But also, this is one of the first electric typewriters. This is a lot of people use this. This sold something like 13 million copies or works, and the big innovation here is this thing called the type ball, which you can actually see at the top. And it's able to do all sorts of things that computers now do instantly, but this is like swap fonts and typefaces, letters with accents, and other types of symbols. And there was a kind of, something like the multiplex, it was called, first previous like turn of the century typewriters that could kind of do that, but it was slow, it was cumbersome, it was heavy. The type ball is like this big, and it works really well. And it kind of revolutionized design, because once the type ball came into effect, there kind of wasn't any need to continue to innovate, because the type ball just worked so well.
But it was amazing because it would just spin around to the right,
It was pretty cool.
It was really cool when you think about the mechanics of that, and it would not break, as opposed to one thing that comes up that's much more simple. That was a complex thing to do.
Totally.
It's so functional.
Yeah, absolutely. It has, to that point, it has 2,800 working parts.
My God.
Yeah.
And not to just be asking about cost, but so how much would that have cost in its regular day? Like if this was
expensive.
Yeah.
But this is what everybody wanted to use. I mean, or
It was a
businesses?
great machine for that occupation. It's a good tool. It was a really good tool.
So all businesses would probably have one of these.
Yeah, between 1961 and 1984, it sold 13 million copies, which was a lot.
I don't have a clue. I guess the secretary didn't buy any of the machines.
I'm surprised it's not readily available.
The oldest typewriter we have here.
I'm just wondering, like, relative price point to, some kind of computer, say, like, it's a lot more relative.
Right.
This is like a prototype, I think.
So this is almost 100 years of development.
Yes.
Okay.
Leads to kind of this big moment. Landmark moment in typewriter history. Yeah, and it's very elegant too. It's it's heavy.
Heavy,
but
very heavy.
and you got to plug it in, and there's all that, which is kind of a modern, contemporary problem that we have of like plugging stuff in. It's kind of like starts with this. Where are we going to find the outlet? But and then we'll move on over here to some of the
I was
typewriters.
just going to touch to these Olivetti posters was kind of a continuation from. Anybody come to the Pushpin show?
Yeah.
So Milton Glaser, as I'd mentioned, designed these with Olivetti, and we just thought it went well with Mad Men typewriter. Perfect. And these kind of came last minute from a collector and designer in New York. They just happen to have these posters and about the show. So we're done.
Maybe you could speak to this more, but from my understanding, Olivetti is the company that's kind of trying to push this kind of modern, artistic flavor.
Right.
A little bit of Dolly.
Yeah, a little bit of Dolly. You had, well, since it was Glaser, and we know Peter Max.
Peter Max.
Right. So Peter Max originally this is all transferring over from the previous show. Peter Max studied or worked with Pushpin for a year or two in the early years, and that those designs transferred over, so you see a lot of his iterations. So just that big colorful pop art kind of era, and Olivetti saw that, and they, like I had mentioned, they hired Satsis to design a modern typewriter. He became one of the creative directors in '59 of Olivetti, so you see that Memphis group touch, that Italian, school of design starting to come into Olivetti, and these posters between him and Glazer, these aren't even the earliest, are just a window into the modernization of typewriters versus electronics. And this electric, here we go, right? So, yeah, sorry.
No, yeah, great.
Kind
yeah,
of
we'll move
funny,
on
like
over
the
to-
wings almost look like hands.
Right.
See that? Like, I mean, they're strange hands, but like,
Yeah, you could model it off a wrist.
kind of interesting.
Futurism a little bit.
I was so glad to see that Simon put these posters and everything. I think that it brings it all together, and it kind of translated from just like this factual historic museum type exhibition to one about the art behind these typewriters. This guy right here, the Dactyl, this is our oldest typewriter. This is 1900. It's very light. It's actually like an early portable, which is crazy because I mean, it doesn't. It gets lighter, and it's still kind of heavy. But yeah, I wanted to mention the Blickendorfer featherweight here because in talking to Jay at Gramercy Typewriter in Chelsea, he was talking about how the turn of the century is kind of the last moment that typewriter companies and inventors are experimenting with different designs. And you'll see here with this one, this is 1909, it's not the keyboard layout, the QWERTY keyboard layer that we know. It's DHIA, whatever. He said this was the most scientific way to write, but it didn't catch on. It wasn't very intuitive. And people preferred some of the layouts that had already been in use. And yeah, I thought that was kind of a weird one because when you look at the keys, they don't make sense, and you would never type that way. But he was kind of pushing for the designer was pushing, like this is how we gotta type now.
What country?
This is I think it's American. Yeah. I believe it's
Made in the USA.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, do you want to talk about the Alpine? Oh wait, no, we're gonna talk about the toys.
Let's talk about the toy one.
Yeah, toy.
So,
Yeah.
so this comes into where I had mentioned Tom's first typewriter, what spurred his interest. Now, when he was talking about his general interest in typewriters, from what I could convey or understand from him, is that it was deeper rooted from his childhood. Like, it's the click, the clack, the rhythmic feeling of a typewriter. I personally prefer a computer keyboard that has the click, the bounce. You don't see them as much anymore. It's more specific. It used to be, they're all like that, right? To emulate what people were used to. It's marketing, so it's subliminal. But what Tom explained is that when he walked into a shop in Turkey, I can't remember what city, sorry, but he went in and it was either this brown one or the Tom Thumb, or the Petite. I don't remember. But he walked in and said, I want this typewriter. This is amazing. Like, I love this typewriter. This is the perfect typewriter. And the salesman said, well, you don't want that typewriter. That's not a real, that's a kid's, that's a toy. Why do you want that? It's gonna break. That's just for memories. He's like, well, yeah, perfect, it's memories, right? So he ended up buying one of these toy typewriters, and that's what he was influenced by, because and this is me now trying to convey maybe what I was getting from the stories in a direct quote. But what I was gathering is that, you know, it seemed like it was a deeper rooted thing of a childhood of growing up. It's like, I'll think of something we grew up with that reminds us of like ephemera, right, of your own life. This was typewriters. So yeah, so like I said, went on for about almost 45 minutes about his first typewriter and it being a toy. I don't remember what his second one was, but I can tell you it was the toy one. So yeah.
The toys were particularly difficult to research. There wasn't a lot of information about them, I think, because for that reason, like, people didn't care because it was a toy typewriter. So those are the ones that I went to the New York Public Library a lot to find newspaper clippings and stuff about these toys and advertisements, or advertisements in newspapers. There was, I think some of the toy typewriters have like an interesting history. Beth, who's the operations manager here, she actually helped a lot with finding some of this stuff out. But the Western Stamping Company made the Tom Thumb one in 1939, and they were wartime. They became this wartime company, like manufacturing aircraft, radio, vacuum sweeper parts, and weapons. Then after World War II, a toy cash register was pitched because that was kind of a popular toy in the 50s. And from there, they came up with this Tom Thumb typewriter. And they have this more artistic design to them, which I think is why Tom was interested, was drawn to that one in particular. I think this is the Marx writer, and it actually says Marx Write on it, and one of the reasons that I couldn't find any information on it is because I'm like, well, there's nothing that says Marx Write, but there are all these Marx writers.
That's
is
my
this
fault.
like a...
That was that evil list.
Yeah. But what I think what had happened is like the R chipped off, and when I went to Jay at Gramercy, he was like, oh yeah, that's a Marx writer. And I was like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree. I love the toy ones. They like this perfect little clean. They have less parts. It's simplified, and I think that's kind of the attraction.
Do they work at all?
The toy ones, that's a good question. I actually don't know.
Functional. The
Yeah,
Tom
it
Thumb
is.
says it was functional.
Okay. Yeah, I think the petite one is. At one point, early on, I kind of knew which ones were and weren't. Liam might be able to continue that conversation, but I spent a year on this exhibition, so some of the info comes in and out. One thing I want to mention, if we see here, everybody's seen The Shining, right? So this is Simon's touch, right? Here we are. We're like, how are we going to do this? 3 days before the show, when he thought of it, he improvises a lot. His favorite word is displazy. That is an invention which I now have adapted that word. But yeah, so Simon said, let's get displazy and design this. But if you look closely, it says exactly. So what is this exhibition, right? It's all about work and theory, a lot of it. So he wanted to do that. There it is, over in this video essay by, I apologize, Avril, I'm trying to remember, Avril Avasar. Some of these are videos that Eric and Simon picked together, but there you'll see one loop that's a continuous loop. I think it's this, and there you go, The Shining. We had to think of a way to fill that space over there, so a couple days before the exhibition, we said, sure, let's get Staples to print all these off, and that was Simon's vision. He wanted to just say what you're seeing, so this couldn't be better timed. Yeah, so we filled that wall with it, put a little over here, you can see in the trash cans, it's that idea of typing, throwing away, type, throw away, and just kind of the madness that comes with trying to use a typewriter, we were talking about earlier, and remember all your words and not use whiteout and everything. So this video essay is put together by, Avril Avasar. He has his PhD in film history, so this was just something that was circulating viral on the internet, and respectfully I reached out, got his good grace on it. He was more than happy to have it in the exhibition, and it was the perfect edit for this exhibition. So that is why we have this famous quote.
Yeah, and the typewriter in The Shining. I was actually just watching The Shining earlier with my family before we came, and they were asking what typewriter was, and it's of the 50s or 60s and 70s kind of style, so it's gonna look like some of those gray ones over there. But the company that made it was Adler, which made the book Universal. But we don't actually have the one from The Shining. But I thought that was, worth mentioning.
Well, I'm just gonna roll that here. Okay. So the Olivetti, here we are. Olivetti Valentine.
I said Valentine,
Yeah.
but
Valentino.
well, because it was done on Valentine's Day, so they would probably
I should have known that, but I'm glad I know that.
came out on Valentine's.
Oh, amazing. Okay, well, let's add that to it. So it came out on Valentine's Day, I just learned. One thing that, before I get into the history of why this exists and looks the way it does, is this book, funny enough, my girlfriend's parents got me this book for Christmas. They had a little clue as to what I want, like a book I wanted. But I was sitting there and I opened it up. I just started the page, I was like, no way. Like, not one, but the only two we're getting that Sansa's designer in this book. How convenient, it's going in the show. So I just rolled in here after the holidays and said, this is going in, we need this, and it's perfect. But so the Valentine typewriter. So I don't know if everybody got to see this, right? This Tom Wesselman painting. So it's based off this painting. This was 68, 61. So this painting was done in 61. This was designed in 68. Santos came on in 58. So he came on, they wanted to modernize the image of typewriters. $76 typewriter, you said?
Was that? I think.
Let's just say under $100, right?
Yeah, but you know what? My memory fails me. Could have been $179, $129. I mean, something like that.
Something
So.
like that. Affordable.
And now I'm sorry I didn't keep the receipt.
Now they go for $500 online.
Yeah.
Working or not. So, anyway, so this typewriter, Wesselman, all this combined, the thing that Santos wanted to do was to make a subliminal modern touch on it. So, of course, we see the red, and this does not do justice to the bright red. The actual painting is like that red. But if you see the two ribbon holders, they're supposed to emulate nipples from this painting because it's a subtle gesture to a modernist painting, and this typewriter was designed for, and I'm going to read verbatim here. It says, in 1968, Santos convinced Olivetti to manufacture a portable typewriter with a bright red body named the Valentine. He suggested that this machine was designed to keep poets company on lonely weekends in the country. There you go. It's a little, of its era, but it is what it is. So yeah, and it's just an amazing looking typewriter. I think it's my favorite. It was Simon's favorite. It's red. It catches you. It's a successful design. It didn't have successful sales. it was a failure, and now it's one of the most sought after vintage typewriters. Even though it's not made well, it just looks cool. Other one is also by Satsis. I got so into researching this one. I do not have anything to tell you about that one, but I do love the keys on it. That's all I can say. And Liam, I know you have a lot to say about that one.
Yeah, and I also just wanted to mention, it does say here, Valentine's Day is when it came out. So we did know. Joe may have not, but no.
I'd hand it off at one point to let you be the expert.
Okay, yeah. This is, well, I'll let you guys look at that for a bit if you guys have any questions about
Okay, so did you say earlier that Tom Hanks owned typewriters, made cameos in a lot of his movies?
Yes, and we tried to, I asked his off, the funniest thing was, I said, I was getting deja vu. I asked 3 times, and his assistant had to remind me that no, they do not have a list. Just write this down. Because you just asked Tom, he's like, he doesn't
I'm remembering the one in Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah. There's You Got Mail, Saving Private Ryan, Harry Met Sally.
I was thinking about Chernobyl, how like every single prop in that show was spot on, like
they
big light keys and the.
They loan out. Was Tom involved in that?
I feel like I can't imagine that his prop company wouldn't have been if that's what he does, because that was like the thing that I was the most obsessed with about that show is how spot on those props were.
Yeah, I didn't. I watched like 2 episodes of that, but I didn't. It's just so funny after putting the show together, just noticing all the typewriters my mom wasn't on Hanks, and I'd watch the movies, and now I'm thinking, it's a typewriter in it. Forrest Gump.
Right.
Castaway. I don't know. Somebody name a movie that
Tom was in.
Anybody remember like what Tom or their typewriter was in one of the movies? Apparently it's his thing. It's his Easter egg, right? He sneaks it in.
And interesting that you mentioned Chernobyl too, because a lot of those are like Soviet typewriters. And this one over here, the company, its assets got split up after World War II. It was a German company. And we can talk about that in a bit later too, but yeah.
Oh, but one other thing, there is one of them here. I think it's maybe that brown one right there, the light brown one. It's either that or the Alpina. Was a typewriter from East Berlin during the when the wall was still up, and he had it modified to replace the W, like some of the buttons to make it.
That's this one.
Oh, it's that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, I'm totally wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. But I remember he was telling us that was one of his other stories about getting these kind of obscure ones that were, like Soviet or limited production that was kind of during certain eras of war that were manufactured like so specifically, such a specific regime.
Yes.
It's crazy.
So this one right here, this big clear one, is my favorite because it's the newest typewriter. It's there are digital aspects to it, and it was developed by this Swintech, by this company located in New Jersey, and it's one of the last typewriter companies in the world. And it stayed in business for one reason all this time, and that is the prison industrial complex. These prisons are allowed, or these typewriters are allowed to be used by prisoners because they're clear, because they're simple, they don't connect to the internet, and you can't like hide a weapon in it, which is one of the big. Yep. And there are still working writers incarcerated who use these typewriters.
Are they still being made?
Yep, they still are active today. The company started with calculators and then quickly made a pivot around the 80s to typewriters because somebody had this idea to make a clear typewriter for prisons, and then it's kind of taken off from there. And they produce electric typewriters and they've got clear plastic cases. And based on the sales figures, it's estimated that thousands of prisoners in the United States use these typewriters every day.
Wow.
These machines have allowed lots of inmates to publish work from incarceration, including journalist John J. Lennon, who writes for The Atlantic, The New York Times, and Esquire.
Yeah. Did you come across any info as to whether or not Apple used this as some sort
For
of
their
design
clear,
basis for
yeah.
the original iMacs that were the big, bubbly, clear?
It hadn't occurred to me, but that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Actually, the Valentine was influenced some of the design. I'd say a lot of modern era, 50s, 60s, 70s influenced Apple, but that was one of them. And yeah, I wouldn't doubt that. That one was, when did they start manufacturing these? Was it early 2000 or was it the 80s?
Early 2000s
okay.
is when,
Yeah, there was another one here that influenced exactly Mac. The earlier Macs that were like the clamshell clear units. So
the first of the Swin Techs were the 80s, but this one is from the early 2000s as far as we know.
Yeah,
okay,
so
that's
maybe
what I remember.
before.
I had one, it was like the transition into word processing. It was a typewriter combination
Yeah,
word
the Daisy, it had
processor.
like a Daisy wheel printer in it or
No,
something.
no.
Or had a little tiny screen that you would see the words.
Yes, the
Yeah,
screen,
I
and
think-
it remembered so that
Yes.
whatever you typed, then you put in another piece of paper, push a
Exactly.
button, and would type
And it would-
the whole thing
yep,
again.
exactly.
It would copy.
Yeah,
So
I had to do exactly.
I don't remember who made it.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and then I had one step up from right before my family got, we had a Commodore 64. Anybody remembers those?
I had that. It was a gift I got.
Yeah, we had that since when I was like 5. It was more like gaming, but before we got our first Pentium family computer, we had a word processor that was basically a typewriter, like a big keyboard that had a screen. I was like, I don't even know where my dad got this thing. Because it was our transition thing between the typewriter and a proper like Pentium powered PC. So it's basically that with a screen, like a bigger screen monitor. So
Yeah, this one has like a little monitor on it.
Yeah, it's got some kind of screen. Yeah, when I went to 2 different typewriter repair shops in the city, they were both like, one of them was like, I don't even touch these guys because I don't know how they work, and the other one was like, I hate repairing these because it's just, there's just not a lot of literature written about it. There's not a lot of instructions because these are not really sold to the public, and so people don't really care if it gets broken. Yeah. There's a great New Yorker article called "A Prisoner's Only Writing Machine," which is how I found out a lot about the Swin Tech. I implore you guys to go and read it. Yeah, it's really cool.
That'd be interesting.
And then, as I had mentioned earlier, the color theme for the show, since we're standing here, was based on baptistry. Yeah. So, yeah, questions?
Were there any typewriters in Tom's collection that used a non-Roman alphabet? Cyrillic or?
I think so. The closest thing we have are like the umlauts here for the German typewriter. It's got the U.
Is it a dedicated key or is it?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And it has some accents too, like the Brav and
Yeah.
I think as well. It's like European accents basically on it.
Yeah.
Even though it's a German type.
Yeah, but it was a Nazi typewriter, so it was all sorts of communicating.
Yeah, and after the war, its assets were split between the Soviet Union and the Allies, I think.
Yeah.
They kind of, then it was split up with the Allies, like France got some, America got some. Because the Continental was very popular. It was, yeah.
Any other questions?
Do you know if all the typewriters in his collection are individually different, or is this 300 made up of some duplicates?
Oh no, we got 2 of the same ones, and we're like, what do we do with this one? But it was actually that little Corona over there that's on the antique table. We have 2 of those. One that's the working one that's like mint perfect condition. I also know it's one of his favorites. We got that one, and then we got a duplicate of it. So it's the only one we removed from the show because we actually had space for it anyway. So it worked out perfect. But yeah, there's some duplicates. He has a couple of the Celetrics. There's a few, but most of them are all unique from what I gathered. Also, when you collect things like this, you buy one, you buy another one for parts. So maybe, you have some duplicates for that reason.
Right.
I just recall regarding your question about typeface, one of the things about the type ball that was so evolutionary is that you could buy type balls that had different characters and request characters, and some companies got custom made ones for that reason of printing in other alphabets.
Yeah, we can just pop it into the ball.
Yeah.
Rather than having to change all the
Exactly.
arms.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, typewriters are already so complicated. It's like, how are you gonna add another complicated element to it?
I know, it's a joke. This is a joke. An old roommate of mine from, must have been 14 years ago. I asked him, what are 2 job professions you would maybe not want to tell your parents that you ended up going into, or you would regret going into? And he said, map maker, because there's enough maps, and a typewriter repair salesman. And that was always a joke between him and I, and here I am now talking about typewriters, and this exhibition was just like, the typewriter repairman was one of the biggest factors in getting these here, right? So put my foot in my mouth. But yeah, I'm glad to see that there's life behind these still, and there's whole different generations that are into them. So.
Well, the movie that was here during this exhibit, the movie that was played, there was that typewriter company, and they closed their doors. Was it California?
Oh, the California Typewriter.
Yeah. Since that film was made, I believe.
Oh, that must be what Aaron, I think he worked with them and split off.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the one that repairs all these in LA and helped me, yeah. Interesting.
So is there any interest in traveling this exhibit?
We hope so. That's more for Sherry, the executive director here, to touch on, but the hopes is that it travels. We haven't, or I don't know yet. Maybe there is in the works, but we would love to see this travel. And Tom we were getting texts from him. He is ecstatic. He loves the show. He's so happy with what Simon did. He's just happy with the way everything went. And with the Sam Messer concept coming together with it, that'd be amazing if that could travel too, because I just think it makes it so much more dynamic to have like this fine art aspect to it. So I would love to see this travel, 100%.